G'day Jafffa Adventures, Terry King here. Welcome to the channel. Well, a few videos back you would have saw that Jill and I are getting prepared to do a pretty big trip. Call it a half a lap, I guess. So with such an extended period away, and we're talking 6-7 months, what do I do to this vehicle to prepare it for something like that? That's the subject matter today. If you're interested in that, stick around. Now, I've already done a very comprehensive video on big trip preparation, and I'll link that in the description. If this subject matter interests you, I encourage you to go check that out because these two videos are definitely linked. This one will pick up on items that were not covered in the first video. That being said, let's get stuck into it. That should give you a little bit of a clue as to the first prep thing that I'm going to do, and that is deal with corrosion and corrosion prevention. I've already been under this car and gurneyed everything, so it's pretty clean. The next thing I'm going to do is undercoat this. Just taping the sheet down onto the floor with a little bit of masking tape because once I get spraying this undercoating, it's going to get pretty sticky and it'll stick to my shoes, and I don't want to track it all through the shed. Okay, drop sheets are all down. Now in a previous video, you would have seen that I've undercoated this with Tectile. I did that well over a year ago, probably 2 years ago now, and that Tectile is still coating this car. So that is one fantastic product that I rate very, very highly. And if my parts supply place would have had some Tectile 506, I would have bought it and used it again. However, they didn't, so I've gone with a different product. This time I'm throwing down some Lantec Steel Seal. I haven't used this stuff before, but I do have mates that have used Lantec before, and they do rate it. The only disadvantage with Lantec over the Tectile is that this stuff is not quite as durable. It's natural, environmental, and sustainable, and you can clean this stuff out of your gun with water, as opposed to Tectile, which is a solvent-based product. And then, of course, you need solvents to clean your kit up. But my experience is that the solvent-based products typically last a little bit longer than these naturally occurring products. However, having said that, this is all I've got, so this is what I'm going to use. Well, our instructions say shaky, shaky, so that's what I'll do. Shaky, shaky. That'll do. Yeah, it's got a little tap on it. That's cool. Now what I'm going to use to apply it is the exact same sprayer that you saw me use the Tectile on. And that's one of these super cheap, quite literally, super cheap auto pressure sprayers. I can tell straight away with this compared to the Tectile that I won't have to cut this. The Tectile was quite thick and I cut with some thinners. This stuff looks pretty good the way that it is. Now I'm not sure how much I'm going to need to coat this, but by the end of this little episode I sure will. And I'll pass that on to you guys. Look at that, I didn't spill a drop. Holy shit, that's a first. Just trying to get my nozzle dialed in right so that I'm not drowning the thing, but I'm actually getting a good application. And that is still drowning. And that is too misty. Oh, it's a fine little pressure sprayer. I don't know whether the microphone's picking up all that dripping, but if it isn't, trust me, it's dripping all over that bit of cardboard, and that would end up on my floor. The alternative is laying on my back in the grass doing it outside. I'd rather do it up on the hoist. All right, I'm going to keep at this. I'll see you guys when I'm done. All right, I'm all finished. I put my bash plates back on and sprayed them, both inside and outside, and have a look at the floor. That is what would have ended up on my shed floor if I wouldn't have put those sheets down. And I certainly wasn't a fan of having to clean that up. But you can see the underside is all done now. It's all slick and shiny. I'm pretty sure that I got everything. I don't think I missed any spots. So how much of this stuff did we actually use? Well, this container is a 2-liter container. I had it filled up to 2 liters. I then came back and got another 1.5 liters, and I'm down to 500 ml now. So for 3 liters, you can do your truck. This container here is 10 liters. I can't remember what I paid for it. If I find that, I'll throw that up on the screen, but it wasn't cheap. So if I've got 10 liters and I'm using 3 per application, that'll give me 3 goes of rust proofing. In the grand scheme of things, that's pretty cheap, I reckon. That took me probably 5 minutes to lay the sheets down, another 15 or 20 minutes to spray the underside of the car. Now, what do I do for under bonnet corrosion protection?
This one might be a little bit controversial, but hear me out. If I'm doing an outback trip where I'm going to be out in the deserts, for example, I don't do anything to the engine bay. I just leave it as it is. But if the trip that I've got planned has got a significant amount of beach work where I'd be exposed to some salty conditions, I shoot the engine bay with a little bit of this tire shine. So I've blown the engine off with some compressed air, and then I just lightly hit it with this tire shine. I don't go crazy. I just throw enough of it down to put, I guess, what you'd consider a protective barrier. And then I'll take a rag and I'll wipe it off. Now my thought process behind this is I want to put a barrier between the salt spray and between any of the metallic components that I've got here under the motor. And tire shine's pretty effective at doing that, actually. Once I get home, I can simply rinse this off and the sand and the salt just sort of peel away. Like I said, not for everybody, but I have used this method over a very large number of years, probably decades actually, and it has never let me down. So for that reason, I'm going to keep on trucking with it. And a quick wipe down with the rag, and then I've got that nice protective layer over top of all of the components in the engine bay. And it's a nice little corrosion barrier. Of course, the reason that I wouldn't do this if it was just an outback trip is because that dust out in the outback sticks like shit to a blanket, and this engine bay would just be completely coated in dust. And in a mixed trip where I do some beach and some outback, I will always err on the side of using the tire shine. I'd rather deal with sticky dust than rusted components, if you know what I mean.
Okay, let's move on to paint protection. What do I do to protect all of the surfaces of the car from bush pinstripes? And I'm fully expecting that we're going to be going through some very, very tight trails. In terms of the panels on the side of the car, I've been running these Rhino Hides now for probably the past 3 years or so, and I absolutely love them. I have been through countless tight trails where unprotected paint would just be destroyed. I'm using a fluorescent light here to try and show you that there is absolutely no pinstriping in that paint whatsoever. And I haven't done any polishing to this or anything. I've just simply pulled that Rhino Hide panel off and wiped off a little bit of the dust. These things live permanently on my car. I used to take them off after doing trips and things like that, but now I just bloody leave them on. I'll pull them off obviously to wash the car and to wash the inside and the outside of the panels, but that's it. As soon as the car is done being washed, bang, I've got the panels back on. These are the older style Rhino Hides that are held on with magnets. My understanding is they've got some new proprietary clip system now that holds the panels on. I've got no experience with that, but the old magnetic system here has just worked fine for me. If you want a detailed review about these panels, I've done a video probably 2 or 3 years ago. You can dig through the library and you can find it in there. Now that of course leaves some panels that are unprotected. Things like the Emu Wings, for example, or this A, B, C, D pillar. There's nothing to stop a big ass stick from coming along here and putting a groove right across there. So I've got to do something to protect these types of panels. Other areas susceptible to damage are my side steps, my scrub bars, and the bull bar, of course. When you're going through grass that's bonnet high or even roof height, that front bull bar takes an absolute copping and a hammering. And for that reason, I'd like to protect that as well. So to protect the areas like the bull bar, the side steps, the scrub bars, and the side of the car, I just use a clear wrap. I've got clear wrap on here now. This has been on the car for probably a couple of years now. As you can see, it's starting to peel off and get a little bit ratty. So I'll take this clear coat completely off and I'll reaffix some wrap back on it. But let's have a look at what the paint looks like. So I'll peel this film off. I will get some wax and grease remover and take off the adhesive, and I'll show you what shape this paint is in after I have flogged the bejesus out of the front of this car. For those of you who follow the channel, you've seen some of the crap that this car has been through. One thing your clear coat doesn't save you from is big stone chips. So if you get a giant gibber come in and knock the clear coat, it can go straight through this stuff. The price of admission, isn't it? There we go, that's the dead film. Let me get some wax and grease remover and clean that up. You could use thinners to get this stuff off as well, but I find it is a little bit harsh on the paint, and the wax and grease remover does it almost as well with much less harshness on our paint. Now I really hope that the GoPro can pick this up, because this is great argument for a clear wrap. That's the wrapped area there.
That's the unwrapped area there. And if you have a look at how pinstriped and peppered that is compared to the wrapped area. Now there's every possibility I could buff those pinstripes out, but why bother when I can just peel a wrap off and my paint is exactly like it was when it came out of the gun. I'll take that any day of the week. Again, this area here has been wrapped. This area here has been wrapped. And you can see that there's no damage to that paint whatsoever. Given that I got a couple of years out of that cheap eBay wrap, I just went back onto eBay, got myself a little bit more, and I'm going to rewrap this now. Now to find this stuff, I just searched plain old clear wrap on eBay, automotive clear wrap, found the cheapest stuff I could get, and there it is, a roll of clear wrap. Now I do a full mechanical sweep on this vehicle before I go out on a big trip, and I've covered that subject matter off in a great amount of detail in another video. I'll put a link to that one down in the description. You can check that out if you want to see. The reason it's so important to do that mechanical run through is you find things like this. Just got my tire back on and I just decided to check the wheel bearings and have a look at this. That ain't right. There's some slop in there. So I dug a little bit deeper again and have a look at this lower ball joint. That's stuffed as well. The other side's all right, but this side is cactus. So after I found out I had that ball joint issue and the wheel bearing issue, I took it into the mechanical shop because I didn't believe I had a press big enough or strong enough to allow me to press that wheel bearing out. And when I did that, I asked the boys whether they could replace those lower ball joints and replace the bushes in the lower control arm as well. As it turned out, it was actually cheaper to buy a complete new lower control arm that already had the ball joint and the bushes installed rather than the individual components. So that's what I did. So we got brand new lower control arm, brand new lower ball joint, obviously brand new bushes. When they were doing this, they also found that these bushes were a little bit, how you going? So I got those replaced as well. I had these steering linkages in my spares box and I said, well, listen, while you guys have got it in the air and you've got the front end pulled apart, why don't you put these new steering linkages in? Which they've done on both sides. Now, if I hadn't done a mechanical inspection on this car before heading out, I have 100% confidence that that lower ball joint would have failed on me and that wheel bearing would have failed on me. And that is not a repair that you can do out in the bush. So I would have been euchred there. So that's just an example of how important it is to go through your car with a fine-tooth comb on the mechanical side of things if you're intending on heading out and doing a big overland trip like we are. The other thing that I always do if I've had a mechanical workshop working on my vehicle is I will go over everything that they did, particularly making sure that it's assembled correctly and that the nuts are done up. It's not because I don't trust the shops, but I don't trust the shops. And here's a classic example. They've replaced this little extension arm on the KDSS. If I follow the sway bar along and have a look at the shell here, look at that. That bolt hasn't been done up. And if I go over here onto the back side, that bolt hasn't been done up either. So they've obviously loosened these bolts slightly so that they could move this sway bar to allow them to put the linkage up, but haven't actually tightened those bolts back up. If I go over and have a look at the other side, no problem. That's all done properly. There's another issue that I found with the KDSS linkage on this side of the car. See that washer right there? That washer actually goes on that side. If we come over here and have a look, that bolt is resting up against that rubber. So there should be a washer between that bolt and that rubber, and they put it on the wrong side. Again, shit happens. I accept that mistakes happen, but that just goes to show how important it is for you to cast your own eyes over the job once the job is finished. So very important. So I'll leave the washer over on that side where they've got it, but I'll pull that nut off and I'll put a washer on that and run that nut back on. If the mechanical shop you've taken your car to has had the wheels off, the other thing I like to check are these wheel nuts. I've not had them loose on me before, but I have had them so tight that I've twisted a breaker bar trying to get these suckers off. And I don't want to have to deal with that out in the bush somewhere. So I'll go ahead and loosen each of these nuts off, and I'll torque them back up to spec and to a tightness where I can actually get them off in the bush. So that's the sort of stuff that I'm talking about. So I'll go through with my eyes and I'll check every one of these components to make sure that everything is tightened up properly. And then I'll go through with a spanner and just make sure everything's nipped up. That way, if something fails when I'm out in the bush, there's one person to blame, That's me. No use blaming the workshop when you're stuck out in the middle of the bush. There's nothing that they can do about it. So that's on you, and it's on me. The next thing I do is I pull apart my spares box completely. This sits permanently where the second row seats go in the back of my cruiser. There's half of it there in the box, and there's the other half of it laid out on the table. Now the idea behind this is just to make sure that everything that's supposed to be in here is in here. And what's supposed to be in here? Well, I've got a list taped to the outside of the box that has every single one of the items inside of that box. If you'd like to see that in detail, I've got a video already cut on that one. Just dig through the library and type in spares in the search bar and you should find it. No dramas whatsoever. One thing that I try to do when I'm packing this spares box is pack it with crap that I don't think that I'm going to use on the bottom and stuff more likely to be used on the top, just to try and eliminate pulling this bloody box apart whenever I want to get something. So for example, auto darkening welding helmet and the front bearing in the hub, those are two items that I wouldn't expect that I would be digging out of there all too often. So I'll try and get those near the bottom of the box. Alternatively, things like a bag of rags or zip ties or duct tape, that sort of stuff you're using all the time. So that stuff will end up near the top of the box. So you kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. Try and make life as simple as possible for yourself. Now another thing I do is charge all of the batteries and all of the rechargeable devices I have, like head torches, sat phone, etc. And I pull out my personal locator beacon and I test it. To do that on this particular unit, you point the aerial skyward, you hit this test button, it sends a signal up to the satellite, comes back down, and if it passes, you get a green light that flashes and a white strobe. So let's hit that test button. Wait for a sec. There we are. Green light and a strobe. So that personal locator beacon is all good to go. It's got plenty of life left on it. Lithium battery, April 2026. Let's move on now to packing up this beast. All right, I got the car all washed down. It's now time to load this thing up. Before I do that, let's open everything up. And if you've got a VX Cruiser and you don't know about this, this is an awesome little feature. Just hold that lock button down, continue to hold it, and it drops all the windows and the sunroof. I suspect the Sahara is probably the same as well. Flush all that hot air out of the car. Next thing I'm going to do is fit the Rhino Hide panels up. I've done a complete video on paint protection. I'll drop that down in the description area if you want to check that out. One of the questions I get about these Rhino Hides is, do they actually work? And the answer to that is an unequivocal yes. Have a look at that scar on that panel right there. That's where a stick got me. And have a look at these two big dings in the door. That's how hard that hit. But have a look at that. There is no scrapes, no paint damage there at all. So if you can take a whack on a stick that hard and not damage the paint, yes, they work. Another example, you can see there's no pinstriping in this paint. I haven't protected the handles. Have a look at that. Pinstriping like crazy. So this Rhino Hide absolutely does work. I love the stuff. Let's have a look at what I'm actually going to fit in this car. So I've got to get all of this into that. Now before I go start loading this up and showing you guys how I get it all to fit, there are a couple of items that live permanently out here in the truck. This hog bag, 115 liter water bladder, I'm going to fill that up. That's my spares box. I've got my Starlink satellite dish. The Drift-A-Bag did not arrive in time, so I am not going to be taking Mr. Drift-A-Bag with us. If you want to find out all about Starlink, the link for that video will be down in the description. In the back of the vehicle, I got my Drift-A-Kitchen. I've got a complete video on that kitchen setup. You can see that in the description below. Empty drawer. We've got a table and of course a fridge. So in terms of real estate, what I've got to work with is this entire area, including the wings on both sides, and this entire back area, including underneath of the shelf unit. First things first, however, let me fill up that hog bag, and that's going to be taking up a fair bit of room in this footwell. Pop off the fill plug, open up the valve, plug in my water line, and take out my vent plug. All right, we'll come back when that's all filled up. All right, let's open the back up and get this sucker loaded. These Emu Wings are fantastic because they allow access to the side of the vehicle. If you're interested in these, I think I've got a 3 or a 4-part video series on how to install them. Check that out. So this is the space I've got to work with in the back. So let me start loading my gear up. First thing is a solar panel. I've got 300 watts of solar on the roof. This panel is simply a spare panel. Next up, drawer number 1. All right, this big cardboard box is full of the Jafffa merch. And if you didn't see my video earlier where I said we were giving away free merch, we're giving away free merch. So if you happen to see us on the trail, say g'day, and we've got a little bit of merch for you. Next up are 3 more boxes. These are obviously just the frames, the drawers slide inside of them. Over on this side, I've got a couple of small packs of drinks, and in this side, a bit of water as well. So this drawer of cans and drinks pops in here, like so. Next piece to the puzzle is this perfectly square drifter bag. That sits up top here. That has my shower hoses, shower mats, and a shower tent. Now on this passenger wing area, I've got a small canvas bag, which we use for firewood. I've got the stove windshield and the 2-burner butane stove. And you can see how easy that is to access through these Emu Wings. Now in this drawer in the passenger side wing is a little bit more alcohol. Got a couple of nice bottles of Taylor's wine for some good friends. I got a bottle of bourbon in an iced tea container. Nice bottle of Penfolds port. And I got a little bit of Blue Label left. That's going to go along with me as well for a special occasion. That pops in there, and I'll just pack in a couple of random waters in here as well to stop the jostling and jiggling and clanking. That's it. That drawer is done. And this side of the car is now finished. We can close this Emu Wing up. That's the switch gear for my airbags, so you can see they're both at 30 PSI at the moment, fully pump up. In this bottom area down here, I've got an airline point. The compressor's mounted back in there. I'll put my suction hose in there. It's got a stainless steel sand filter on it so I don't suck crap up into the pump. The shower hose, which is a simple garden sprayer. And we keep a banister brush in here as well. That side's finished. On the opposite side under here, I've got a hydraulic bottle jack in there. That lives in there. This is our first aid kit, survival first aid kit. Tire repair kit. I popped that in here because I like to get to it easily and quickly. And I've gone through that tire repair kit to make sure everything in there is okay. I did have to put a few more plugs in there because I've used a few up. And then this leg is for this swing out table. And if you don't know about these tailgate tables, they are bloody awesome. I've done a video of that. I'll pop that down in the description. You can see that. So that's it. That underside is now finished. Let's move up to the top side. This here's my toolkit. It lives in here permanently. If you want to know what's inside of that toolkit, I've done a complete video on everything in that toolkit. Just have a look in the description and you can see that one. This is a awning that Velcros onto our wraparound 360-degree awning. That's got pegs in there as well. The awning's freestanding, but in really, really windy weather, I do like to peg it down. In this bag, I've got 8 butane cylinders, separated with a little bit of carpet so that they don't rub on one another. That just simply sits up on top of my toolbox like so. In this bag, I got GoPro equipment, microphone equipment, basically all the extra bits and pieces of the camera gear that I bring along. That one also sits up on top here. And that's it. This Emu Wing is done. We can close her up. Now I've made sure I've got my drone all charged up so it can be stored away in its little pocket. The controller, it's all charged up. We can store that away. That's the spares box I referred to earlier. This is all the stuff that's in it. Down here we've got Travel Buddy, and here I've got my recovery gear. This is a little magnetic hat holder. That's just an Akubra, of course. And this thing's called a Klipsta, K-L-I-P-S-T-A. And it's just basically 2 magnets. And the brim of your hat just clips between those 2 magnets. And that hangs up out of the road. I love it. Now I'm going to pop my rooftop tent up because I've got to set it up as well. Got to put our winter bedding in there now. If you want to know all about this bunded top tent, I've got a couple of videos in the library as well. I'll pop the links to those videos down in the description. And here's what fits in top of our rooftop tent. We have 2 massive sleeping bags. See, that sucker's probably 1.5 meters wide. It's huge. 5 full-sized pillows. And underneath it here is a sheet, an electric blanket, and a 4-inch foam mattress. All of this fits up inside of the rooftop tent, and the rooftop tent closes. so we never have to carry this stuff up and down. That's it. All the bedding is stowed upstairs. The ladder is just one of these collapsible jobbies you can get off of eBay. The one that came with the rooftop tent was crap, and I detailed that in the video I did on the Bungee Chop. And that collapses down to that size. Now what happens with that? That ladder just ends up in this canvas bag. The canvas bag is not actually to protect the ladder, it's to protect everything else around the ladder from getting chafed on the ladder. And the ladder pops in here, like so. Now there's one more thing to go on this side. This is my shoe shelf, and it mounts up here like this. I've done a whole video on this shoe shelf. If you've got yourself a hard shell rooftop tent, and it's a pain in the backside to manage your shoes when you're going up and down the ladder, check out something like this. Might work for you. Shoe shelf slides in there. This part of the car now is finished. On the back of the cargo barrier here, I've got a rescue swag mounted, I've got a 18-volt Ryobi chainsaw, and I've got my Indiflate and airlines and all those sorts of things in here. Got a fire extinguisher, which I can easily access. Got some fishing gear. Got some sand pegs to peg down the awning should I need to. I got my fishing pole, and in this bag wrapped up here is a spare CV, because cruisers, when you flog them, will blow a CV. So I don't want to be stranded out there in two-wheel drive. Hence the reason I've got a CV and I can swap it out if I ever break it. Knock on wood, I haven't done that yet. In here go our two full-size camping chairs. Just like that. Up here go our clothes bags. We haven't packed those yet, but we got a his and hers, so one here and one here. This is our toiletries bag. It just tucks up in here. And this is our bug out bag, and that carries some pretty important gear. I will actually do a complete video on that bug out bag a little bit later, but that sits between our seats so that we can grab it very, very quickly should we have an emergency situation. As you can see, that bug out bag just lives here, right behind the center console. Easy to grab in an emergency situation. And that's it for this side. Buttoned up. In this small little pouch here, we keep our reef shoes because they get sandy and wet, of course. In this larger pouch here, apart from rubbish, of course, which is the main thing that you carry in these bags, you don't want to have the rubbish in the car with you. We've got our toilet and toilet seat. That pops in there, and the rubbish can tuck in front of it. The other thing that lives in this little pouch is one of these small fire pits, and that's just for areas where you can't have an open fire and it needs to be contained in something. Everybody needs a shovel. I'm no exception. So we got ourselves a shovel holder here. That's it. That's in there nice and strong too. Beautiful. And of course the water. You gotta have water, especially in Australia. The car's equipped with a long-range tank, so I've got 270 liters of fuel on board. So I typically don't need fuel in this jerry can holder, so I put 2 water cans in here most often. We'll fill that up with water, and then we'll call our water carrying done. In terms of total water that I carry, not counting what you got in bottles, of course, but I got 40 liters here on the back, and I got 115 liters in the hog bag. I've done a whole video on water management, carrying and storing and using water. If you want to have a look at that, that'll give you a little bit of an idea how long we can last off-grid with just the water that we're carrying. And that's what the back looks like all packed up. There's a bit of space here. Jill's an avid reader. She's going to put a bag of books up here, which is all good. Drinks, food, 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 kitchen, fridge. That's it. That's us for 5 months.
Well, Jill and I are now in Port Lincoln. You want to see all that kit and that truck put to the test over the next 5 months?
Come and join us on the adventure. Keep the shiny side up. Bye now. You didn't tell me. I just thought I was
How about
just
something like,
no, you were throwing to me.
yeah, I'll throw to you. How about